So I'm really excited about tonight in our session. Charlie Barraza is here from the Children's Campaign to join us so we can talk a little bit more about our next steps and initiatives. A lot of people who are involved in the collaborative have really had innovative ideas, but things sometimes stand in our way for our children, for our educators, for our families from a policy perspective. So part of Nebula's mission and vision of supporting resilience can't just be by supporting the people when we're falling apart, but that we're really looking to lift up voices to make long-term and effective change. Nebula intends to do this in a couple different ways, so you can keep it in the back of your mind as you're watching this. Not just as empowerment and some coaching and getting you connected to be able to share these messages, but also understanding that educators and those who sit in certain positions might also risk their job or be afraid of future employment by what we say or what we share. So Nebula is also a hub with the collaborative of data collection to be able to share this with decision and policymakers through a safe space. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Charlie, to share with us more information.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you everyone for this opportunity. I always love giving these kinds of presentations to fellow wonks or advocates or people who just care about the issues, because it requires a village to really get anything done when it comes to children, families, and that comes from being in direct service, working in the classroom, working to help provide healthy school meals, but that also goes all the way up to the policy, to making sure that we have proper funding of what we need in our schools, to make sure that the implementation of laws such as universal preschool is done correctly and at the betterment of all kids. So I really appreciate this opportunity to help educate and empower you to be your own advocates for your community. And just a quick brief, my name is Charlie Barraza. I'm the advocacy manager with the Colorado Children's Campaign. So the Colorado Children's Campaign is a nonprofit, nonpartisan policy and advocacy organization committed since 1985 to ensuring every chance for every child in Colorado. In 1985, a group of very vocal advocates for children and families realized there was a lack of space for an advocate in the Capitol building for the needs of our youngest. So they founded the Colorado Children's Campaign to be that voice for children and youth in the Capitol building. We champion policies and programs in 4 different areas: child and family health, early childhood, youth success, which is the K through 12 age group, and family economic prosperity. We work statewide through a network of local community activists who help inform us about what are the actual issues impact on the ground and help make sure that we properly implement laws so that they get the best bang for their buck. And we also work in coalitions with other nonprofits, with community leaders, business leaders, to make sure that we are all unified in the same message and the same issues to make sure we actually get stuff done in the Capitol building. And a lot of our work is research and data driven. We're very proud of our annual Kids Count in Colorado report, which provides data and trends on the state of kids and families in the state of Colorado, done not just at the state level, but also done on a county by county level, providing a bunch of data indicators about child and family well-being so that you know how kids are doing in your county relevant to the state of Colorado. So I want to begin this Policy 101 talking about the 2023 legislative session and what were some of the energies or themes coming into the session. So we just came off of elections, so there's new legislators and new leadership in both the Senate and the House. This led a lot of these new legislators were Democrats, but there was a lot of thoughts that it was going to be a very progressive legislator because the Democrats had full control of the governorship, the House, and the Senate. In reality, we'll get into that a little bit later. Governor Polis also started his second and final term as governor with a lot of big issues that he wanted to highlight and take care of, such as early childhood, housing, land use, and environmental sustainability. And it was a tighter budget year. You know, Colorado has done really well economically since the COVID pandemic has started to recede, but it was a tight budgetary year with a lot of the taper constraints in effect. So how did the 2023 legislative session go? It was incredibly productive. Over 650 bills were introduced, which is one of the highest in recent history, and over 490 of those were passed. Polis also led this year with the most vetoes he's ever had as governor, with 10 of those bills. Because the Republicans were in such a minority position throughout the entire government, they were really forced to use delay tactics and the filibuster as their main form of protesting. Otherwise, they had no real control or influence in the legislate. In turn, and this required Democrats to schedule regular weekend work periods, a lot of times to be working late into the night, 10 p.m., midnight. And they even evoked a rarely used rule known as Rule 14, which limited the amount of time for debate on certain bills. This is something that hasn't really been done a lot in the past, but in the last couple of weeks of the legislature, they were trying to push more and more and more bills, and the Republicans kept filibustering, so the Democrats eventually used these tactics. And even in the Democratic caucus, they were not unified. There was a lot of infighting between the progressive and the moderate wings of the caucus. You can kind of think of it as the separation of the Senate, more moderate, and the House being more progressive. So there were several issues that failed to pass. Specifically want to mention one of Governor Polis's biggest bills of this year, the land use bill, which would have created more state control of land use, failed because the progressive and Democratic parts of the Democrats were not in line. So how about our priorities and our impacts in the legislative session? We were really, really proud of all of the bills we were able to get passed. All of our priority bills, in fact, were able to get passed. This includes such things as a multi-year continuous eligibility for Medicaid and CHIP Plus, ensuring access to reproductive and preventive health services, especially in the wake of the Supreme Court decision. A really great bill was the family planning funding in the long bill. That allowed for a much more funding to be given to family planning services. In crucial child care contribution tax credit reauthorization that allowed for us to gain $60 million annually for child care provider services. We were past the retained revenue for universal preschool, which is now the Prop II, which will be going to the ballot this coming November. Allowing remote access for eviction proceedings, which allows over 1,700 people who are in threat of eviction to be able to remotely access those proceedings, and the Public School Finance Act, which increased per pupil funding by 10%. All of these bills have impacts on the ground, even if I just said a lot of words to you. As I had mentioned in some of those highlights, we're really proud of what these bills will be able to get accomplished. 1,200 more Coloradans will be able to access the family planning program. $24 million was invested to help low property wealth Colorado school districts. We were able to retain, hopefully with voter approval, $24 million for universal pre-K program. We were able to keep 28 million for Coloradans to be enrolled in Medicaid and CHIP, and now 8,000 families will be able to access eviction proceedings remotely. So now I want to move forward to the 2023 election and make sure you have your information available in front of you. So as always, the election will be on Tuesday, November 7th, 2023, and mail ballots are always available. Make sure that you send in your mail ballot postmarked by October 30th. You can vote online up until October 30th and in person through November 7th. I highly recommend that you go to the Colorado Secretary of State's website to confirm your voter registration, as well as be able to track your mail ballot status. And it's a little early now, but in a couple months, you'll be able to go to that website listed, ballotready.org, to view a sample ballot of what you will see once it comes in the mail, review the elected officials, find the nearest ballot box for you, and just make the whole process much easier and for you. So I also want to talk a bit about the ballot measures that you will see in this coming election and what we are supporting and hope that you will also support. The first is Prop HH, a property tax and revenue change. It is a very complicated and weedy provision, but pretty much we support it because it will provide property tax relief to low and middle class homeowners at a time of skyrocketing valuations without hurting schools and other local services. The measure itself is meant to be a change to the tax code to make sure that family owners are not paying as high rates as it currently stands. The other one that I had mentioned earlier that we are supporting is Prop II. This is the revenue retention from Prop EE, which passed several years ago and was a tax and vape, a tax on vape and tobacco products, specifically for universal preschool programs. And this will retain almost 24 million to ensure that Colorado universal preschool program can be as successful as it possibly can be. Now I want to go into the policy development process and kind of talk through how it looks like, what our role is in it, and maybe think through any questions you might have. So what happens outside of the legislative session as we are currently in? So we are in its interim period, usually between May and January, unless the governor declares a special legislative session, as happened during the COVID crisis. In the meantime, interim committees and task force meet on specific issues to discuss potential policy solutions and also provide opportunity for the public to also give their own input. This year's interim committees will include focuses on opioid use, child welfare, and school finance. And also coalitions and legislators begin to meet to discuss policy priorities and bills that should be pushed in the upcoming legislative session. And it's also important to note that the ballot measures this November will be very impactful in the next session, specifically the amount of funding available for universal preschool. So how are we involved in the policy process? So we convene and engage with a variety of those coalitions I mentioned to help to unify the voices and efforts on specific issues. A lot of the coalitions that we specifically convene are the School Climate Coalition, All Kids Covered, Family Planning Access for All, the TANF Coalition, and our Early Childhood Community Calls. We're also involved in numerous implementation efforts with state agencies and sit on several working groups and task force to think through what is the best policy solution that helps all kids and families. We also serve as a conduit for information on bill writing, negotiations, political processes and lobbying, and implementation updates for community leaders and advocates like you, so you know what's going on and that is being done for the best for you, what is best for you. We also utilize data and nonpartisan tactics to persuade elected officials and government agencies on what is the necessary policy changes for youth and families. So there are some things to consider when we work on these bill negotiations and on bill drafting, and specifically that's making sure that everything we work on has an equity-focused lens on those issues. So that requires several very important steps, such as a thorough stakeholder and community engagement from beginning to end. We want to make sure that the coalitions or the thought leaders have relevant lived or work experience in these issues and that they're guiding the actual bill writing and the implementation. We need robust outcome measurements and especially disaggregated data reporting. It is only through disaggregated data that we know how these bills and how these laws affect kids on a racial and ethnic basis, on a socioeconomic basis, and that data is incredibly important for us as we understand trends. We also need to make sure there's equitable representation on the boards, commissions, and task force, people with real lived experience, with real work experience that have experienced hardship in these specific issue areas. And then providing support for individuals who serve on those boards, commissions, and task force. A lot of times, these people have to pour through hundreds of very technical wording and documents, and it is important that we take care of them as they are taking care of us. You can read more about our equity guidelines that help guide how we write bills and implement them through our equity guidelines. I want briefly, even though we're out of session, kind of go through how a bill becomes law in Colorado. So depending on if it is a Senate or House bill, it'll have separate numbers attached to it. And it really begins in one of the two chambers through a committee hearing, which includes public testimony. After that, if there's any money involved with the law, it has to go through the Appropriations and Finance Committees. Once those are done, it goes to a chamber floor vote. And if it passes, it goes to the next chamber. If it starts in the House, goes to the Senate and vice versa. A similar process happens goes through committee. If it's finance, it has financial in nature, has to go through those, and similar chamber floor votes. If there's discrepancy from any part of these voting processes, they have to be reconciled through a conference committee, and then it heads to the governor's desk for a signature or veto. So now I want to talk a little bit more about how to actually lobby your elected officials and also provide some resources to help make you think through how to write an email or testimony. So it's important to know every year what is the legislative makeup of Colorado. And as of now, the Democrats have a trifecta, which means control of both legislative chambers and the governor's mansion, which gives them an incredible amount of power over the Republicans and what their policy priorities are. It's always important to note the statewide officials and also the leaders in the chambers. So the governor, Jared Polis, our Secretary of State, Jena Griswold, the Attorney General, Phil Weiser, and our State Treasurer, Dave Young. Our congressional official offices, I don't need to name all of these, but it's important for you to just put a name to a face and understand who represents us in Washington, D.C. And also the General Assembly leadership. We have in the Senate, Stephen Fenberg as president, Dominic Moreno as the majority leader, and Paul Lundeen as minority leader. In the House of Representatives, we have Julie McCluskey. This was her first year as the speaker. Monica Duran as the majority leader, and Mike Lynch as the minority leader. Barring any changes or any crazy infighting within parties, we expect these leaders to stay for the 2024 legislative session. So now to talk through how to lobby. So first, want to just discuss some tips and tricks about when you are advocating or directly speaking to lawmakers. And it really helps to be prepared with some talking points, just 2 or 3 things about like why you care about this issue, why it affects you, and why you need the lawmaker to vote a certain way or amend a certain bill. Make sure in those talking points you have that clear and concise ask. Be direct about if your ask is vote for, against, or amend. Always be honest, polite, respectful, and a good listener. These people do care about you, that you are their constituent, and the respect has to go both ways if any of us are going to be able to get anything accomplished for kids and families. It's important to know the audience, the party, and the geography. Especially, it helps if you are a constituent of that elected official, but get to know a little bit about them. Read their background, their website. Make sure to know a little bit maybe of their voting history and what you care about, and just get a sense of like what they are dealing with politically. Never make assumptions of these lawmakers. You know, they are dealing with a lot of different interests. They're dealing with a lot of different people lobbying in their ear. And it's really important for you to just see them as a person, see them as someone who's trying to do good, and come from that approach of good faith when you ever talk or lobby with lawmakers. And don't get frustrated. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And it requires a lot of working and communicating and back and forth between you, the lawmaker, the state agencies, other coalition members. So it requires just constant engagement, constant working together, and eventually it will get done. And remember, you are the expert. You are the constituent. You are the one who has work or lived experience. You're the one who took the time out of your day to go to the Capitol building, to go to a town hall, to go talk to your elected official, and they know that. So have that confidence that you are doing something good and that your presence is meaningful, because without you there, maybe no one would say anything. Now, when it comes to drafting a fact sheet, we really recommend this as something for your elected official to kind of take away from your experience and kind of stew with what you are asking them for. It's really important that the fact sheet is visually pleasing, and less is always more. Keep to 1 page, 2 maximum. Bullet points and graphics and stats are really key here. Just things to really take away from your conversation and your issue. Prioritize the main points, goals, and asks, very similar to if you actually talk to your lawmaker in person. Always be able to list who else is supporting this. Is there other organizations, other community leaders? Make sure that the more people who are backing the fact sheet, the more oomph it has behind it. Make sure to include contact information like name, phone number, and email address so that the elected official can come back to you and have a conversation. You never know. And I've heard stories in the past of nurses, teachers, doctors get an email out of the blue from just a conversation with an elected official, and they are able to work together on even getting a bill on the floor. And again, remember, you are the expert, so the fact sheet doesn't need to be. It's something for the elected official to take away on and stew with and think upon. But you are the person that is going to make the change. You're the person who's going to be able to get something into the legislate. And below are some examples of fact sheets that you can look at as templates or to help you think through how to make one. Then testifying at the Capitol. This is honestly a really cool and fun experience that if you are able to ever do, I highly recommend it. It's an issue that you care about and you have the capacity and ability for it. It's a very interesting, but testimony is very limited to usually 3 minutes and can even be shorter. So we highly recommend you practice your comments beforehand so you can really be succinct and hit the point that you really want. You need to concisely state your position on the bill and why you support or oppose it. Make a clear ask of the committee members to vote for, against, or amend the bill. The members may ask you some follow-up questions, but you don't need to know the answer. It's okay to be able to follow up with them at a later date. And if you want to share your view with the committee but cannot testify in person, you can always submit your comments in writing, and I will point you to that resource shortly. Another thing I want to highlight for us is our annual Speak Up for Kids event. So for the last 10 years, we have held an annual advocacy day that highlights issues affecting youth and families. This has been seen as a policy advocacy training like I've done here. We've also done lobby days. We've brought legislators to come speak, and we are really gearing up to do something like this for 2024. The real purpose of this, the Speak Up for Kids event series, is the opportunity to share information about the electoral outcomes, key players, and overarching political themes, increase awareness of key legislative issues related to child well-being, and then provide those resources and training for advocates to effectively engage at the Capitol with the elected officials and within your own communities. As I mentioned, in 2024, we're gearing up to do a Speak Up for Kids event series that will include a similar but more in-depth policy advocacy training, lobby days, so where we will bring a bunch of people with our partner organizations to the Capitol building to bring momentum for these issues, and then the post-session celebration to come together and celebrate the great achievements we were able to do together for kids and families. So we'll be on the lookout for more information later in the fall. And I also want to share this QR code for all of you. This was created for our 2023 Speak Up for Kids Day and is kind of a bevy of amazing resources and tools and templates for you to use when it comes to calling or advocating for the issues you care about. These documents include tips for writing and calling your legislator, templates for the legislative committee testimony and press engagement, House and Senate district fact sheets, legislator contacts and committee assignments, and additional resources from our partner organization, Clayton Early Learning, and us, the Colorado Children's Campaign. A lot of these resources are in English and in Spanish, and we really, this will be a constant source of resource that we develop every year for people like you to know how to get in contact with your legislator, how to write testimony or write them an email, and how to be able to engage the best you can for kids and families. Some of the example of these resources I just wanted to highlight include an advanced advocacy toolkit, tips and templates for calling, emailing, or testifying, as well as the key committee contacts and sign-up information so that you can always be in touch and you know who you need to call when you need to raise your voice. I will send this presentation and a lot of these links in later to Rebecca, who can share them with the rest of you so that you have these whenever you possibly need them. I also want to share some links for how to follow legislation during the session. Great source of info is the General Assembly website. You can also find who your legislator is through that website. You can always listen and watch through leg.colorado.gov or the coloradochannel.net. And the very important committee, the Joint Budget Committee, which impacts the annual budget that the governor always uses and recommends to them, is a very important committee to track just to make sure what is the actual money available for us to do for kids and families. And with that, I just wanted to express my deep gratitude and thank you for letting me come into this space. And if there's any questions now, I'd love to answer them, but I really do appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I'll move into questions in just a moment too. But something that we really hope to add is kind of really understanding and meeting in the middle as to where some of our early childhood educators are at. One of the powerful things that we're finding through conversations with reflective practice is the aha moment of if only ... And that's the wonderful thing about our system and policy is that's how we make those types of changes. So I will post more information as well with the recording. So that way we have the PowerPoint, people have the links and access to all of that.